And obviously the Hispanic population is one that seems to be targeted, as well as the Asian population.
On the Hispanic community, I think it's probably going to make them more recalcitrant and more reclusive.
They've come to the United States, learn English. What I don't like is making against the law about other languages. I don't like that.
So what is going on here in this bill? Let's take a look. In this highlighted area, this bill is declaring English to be the official language of the state of Oklahoma, stating that legislative findings must preserve and enhance the role of English as the official language. Also, it prohibits actions which diminish or ignore the role of English as the official language of the state. Considering that this is being voted on in November, let's analyze this bill in detail. The bill claims that the use of the common language will remove a barrier of understanding, also helping to unify the people of the state. Let's see how this statement can be misconstrued.
I mean, the official English bills, the official English initiative, seems rather innocuous on the surface. It's often presented as a patriotic act or as an act that will bring about unity in our society and in Oklahoma as a whole. Is that often these efforts bring about discord amongst different segments of the society, and the reasoning for this is because certain populations feel targeted, and in some cases actually seem to be targeted under the surface. And the more dire and more concerning aspects and repercussions from such legislation are discrimination against these populations. And the discrimination already exists. The negative feelings against immigrants already exist. And so laws such as this really are manifestations of these feelings that already exist in the community. There was an instance in Texas where a mother was brought up on charges of child abuse because she was not teaching English to her child in the home.
Well, I think it's going to permeate and percolate through all levels of society. Already, I think we're seeing this kind of assault on minorities, linguistic minorities, ethnic minorities. We're seeing an assault on them that will eventually trickle into the public school systems. We're going to see bullying, and we're going to see the cheerleaders are not going to want a Hispanic cheerleader because she speaks Spanish. They're not going to want to have the captain of the football team. He can't be captain anymore because he speaks Spanish. See a brown person, and they're going to pull that person over because that will be the automatic trigger for suspicion. You look like a Mexican to me, and so I'm going to pull you over. I'm going to ask you for papers. And so I think it's going to create a very hostile environment. It's going to create that, it's going to have a resurgence of that hostility towards people simply based on what they look like, based on their color. And if you look at the history of the development of the racial profiling in Germany against the Jews, it started with identification. You have to carry identification. You have to carry a card. You have to, put on a badge that says you're Jewish, and then eventually we've got people, being incinerated in ovens. And like I said earlier, I'm not fully convinced anymore that Americans are above that. I'm not convinced we are that, but I'm also a little leery that we're not that special.
Looking back at the bill, the first line here says, "The use of a common language removes barriers of misunderstanding and helps to unify the people." According to Amber and David, this is not going to happen.
Initial movement with which I was aware was the drive to make a constitutional amendment to the Oklahoma Constitution back in 2002, and this effort was combated in front of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and was indeed was indeed overturned because of its unconstitutionality. There have also been bills proposed numerous times since then, including in 2003, in 2006, I believe, also in 2008, and then more recently in 2009.
And Oklahoma has this image, out in the world of being a very backward place. Whenever Oklahoma legislators started saying, "Yeah, this thing in Arizona sounds pretty good to us," I have friends who are professors at Wesleyan and Dartmouth, and they called me and said, "I can't believe your legislators are talking like that. How could you be so different from them?"
That's popular. Running the English-only bill was popular. It polled very popular. It was a very popular thing for Representative Terrell to do. And if you were looking for another office it was something that got his face and his voice and his presence out there. So politically, it was a very good thing to do because it was a very popular thing that the majority of the public supposedly in Oklahoma wanted and liked. It was hooked on to immigration, which they were very reactive about immigration. So it was popularly polled very well, and it put him out there politically. So I'm sure that he recognized that it was a good political move. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a very wise move for the state or for the people of the state.
Although the bills themselves specifically designate that only official and government language will be affected, it will certainly have repercussions in the private sector as well. Many bilingual programs aim to help ease children into society and help to educate them. Since many schools are state-funded, taking these opportunities away will put these immigrant children further behind in terms of their education.
Even though earlier in the bill, this piece of legislation stated that English would only be used for official actions, later it states requiring a private employer to permit the use of a language other than English on the job or sanctioning a private employer for requiring the use of English on the job shall be presumed to diminish or ignore the role of English as the official language of Oklahoma. Also, it states, bilingual or bicultural education programs which maintain a student in a language other than English shall be presumed to diminish or ignore the role of English as the official language. This seems to be stating that bilingual programs, as well as using English on a private job, will not be allowed. So what are some solutions to this?
But rather than making it illegal and rather than making it more difficult, let's make it easier for them. Let's provide the facilities to do that. Let's do those things. And of course, this gets into jobs, and people are saying, well, they're taking people's jobs. Well, look out here on the Capitol grounds. The people you see working on the Capitol grounds right now, guess what nationality they are? Mexican. Every one of them. And when you walk by, guess what language they're speaking? Mexican. So if you really believe that, then why don't you walk outside your own front door and enforce what you're saying? If you really believe that. If it's not a political ploy, educated people and learned people had a problem with it because it just reduced the scope of our young people learning. What was so funny was the day that this was pushed so hard. We go down to the Chesapeake Boathouse on the river down here, and we had a group of young people here from China, and guess what? They sang in Chinese. And I said then, I sure hope Randy Terrell's not here because he'll have them all arrested.
Well, who wants to go someplace where you're looked down upon and you're looked at as an invader, a usurper? Most of the Hispanic people that come out of Central America have American Indian ancestry. Mexicans have Aztec, Mayan ancestry. There are 68 languages spoken in Mexico besides Spanish.
Obvious power play to solidify the political strength of the majority of the population, the Euro-American segment of the population. Their power is institutionalized, and so the English-only effort is really an indirect way of solidifying this power and of repressing certain minorities.
We pretty much look at Canada and have looked at Canada as a population partner. Now, though, Canada is looked at as a window for Arabs and Muslims to come into this country, and so they're tightening the borders now in Canada as well. But not because they're afraid of Canadians, but because they're afraid of other people.
What happens, if we enact official English laws or English-only laws? What would the effect be for using these place names, which are derived from Native American languages? There have been many movements on the part of Native Americans and other concerned citizens to have these place names changed, and perhaps to be changed to what Native American people originally called these places. The S word is in some ways equivalent to the N word, right? That's derogatorily used to refer to African Americans. And so continuing to use these names in a way, it strips Native American people of any power over the naming of places. It's a further way of repressing their power and their autonomy.
We're living in the 21st century now. Don't you think that it's time to take some responsibility and change these derogatory and pejorative place names to something that is not going to offend Native Americans and African Americans alike?
Okay, first of all, our proposal is that English become the official language of the state of Oklahoma, and for the purposes of this, we don't believe it'll be divisive in any way, and this is an amendment, and so we obviously have many exceptions in it, and we don't believe that any of these exceptions are going to be or we don't intend them to be used to belittle any person or any language, or single out English as better, or to protect public health and safety, and to teach English to those who are not fluent, sign language and Braille, Native American Language Act, etc., and to protect the rights of victims of crime. And we feel that these exceptions make it so that demonstrate that the bill is not in the wrong spirit, and it's not meant to be divisive or any sort of be viewed in any sort of negative context.
Fact. I mean, it's only for the state of Oklahoma, true, but there are so many other languages spoken in the state of Oklahoma alone that defining English as the official language would just rather restrict the cultures, the various cultures, including the Native American cultures, the Latino cultures, the Asian American cultures, et cetera, et cetera. No funding will be used unless necessary, it says in the bill. We believe that this bill is rather backwards in its...
Because our country is founded on equal rights and freedom of speech, and if we were just to expose our citizens just to English, then that would just be undermining exposure to other cultures.
So this is addressed to actually both groups. So regarding language as the conduit to express a culture's language, or through a specific culture's, how will this interfere with the inhabitant speaker's ability to express their culture?
They would be discouraged from expressing part of their culture.
To choose English as official language is vital, and it should be like that.
I wanted to ask, what is the purpose of this bill, and why is it a necessity to our state?
Facilitate easier communication among government officials.
It also gives everyone a common ground to be able to, express their feelings and issues.
Why would this even come to a vote? Why was this an important bill? Because it doesn't seem like it's really going to do anything except for just waste a lot of bureaucrats' time.
It's the symbolic nature of having it be put on paper as our official language, because we don't feel like you draw anything but unity from having something on paper as this is part of who you are as an American. This is passed, then enhancing the communications between bureaucrats and stuff will, by the trickle-down effect of efficiency, make us make up for the fact that it does cost time and money.
Will voting ballots be printed only in English, and isn't that preventing minorities from voting? Will that be like, will there be another literacy test like back in the days of slavery? What's up with that?
It already requires that a lot of things are translated, so we're not saying that, I mean, it's required by the federal government, so Oklahoma wouldn't change in any way in that sense.
So what is being done that is helping immigrants learn English? And what also is being done to help languages that are dying survive?
That's a good question. At OU, where you go to school, there actually is a department where they have Native American languages. I know the Cherokee is taught there. Some of the tribes are starting their own colleges. The Cherokees have a immersion program where they teach the little kids their language from the beginning because they had begun to lose their languages.
As far as the Native communities are concerned, I think we will do what we have always done. And in our communities, with our own resources and our own rights, we'll protect our language.
Because many of the Native American languages are being taught through immersion schools, such as Cherokee Nation's immersion preschool that they have set up. And so subjects are taught to children in Cherokee, so they are learning Cherokee through learning about math and science. It would definitely help if, along with such legislation, if more funding was provided for ESL classes. There are not enough classes to teach English as a second language available. There are waiting lists for the classes that do exist.
I think it's going to cause a big difference between English-speaking residents and non-English-speaking residents, and I don't think there's going to be a very big difference in change in the daily life that I'll see.
Well, I think it is going to cause way too much problems. For instance, you're going to have the Mexican people who don't speak English. They're going to be forced to try to learn English, and when it doesn't happen, there is going to create unnecessary animosity between the English speakers and the non-English speakers.
Yeah, I haven't really heard much about it, but I think that English needs to be the dominant language. Maybe as maybe with like a little bit of Spanish on the side.
I don't know. It's hard to say, really. It's good in the respect that, I mean, if you live in America, you're supposed to speak English, but it's bad that it's going to create racial lines.
You know, I really hope that anybody who sees your documentary or looks at this bill looks at it from the perspective of what it has the potential for doing, the harm that it can do, and will stand up against it. So people want to learn English. English is de facto the language of the United States. Most correspondence is carried out in English. Spanish, for example, is accommodated in some ways, but still people are streamlining into English-speaking society. So in a way, leaving things alone would be the best course of action, but barring that, providing for more classes and more opportunities for non-English speaking immigrants to learn English would definitely help. And that is part of the problem with many of these initiatives, is that they do not provide for this additional type of infrastructural support to allow to help people. Stand up against these things because they are harmful, and they are the triggers for even more harmful forms of legislation and community behavior. It's a green light, and let's don't have those kinds of green lights. Can't we all just get along? It's a sign, unfortunately, this bill is a sign to the rest of the world that we are somewhat backward in our view of a world society and a world economy. It doesn't fit to say that I'm all about a world economy, I'm all about getting along in the world, I'm about expanding in the world, I'm about you becoming more involved in us. But oh, by the way, we don't want to talk English, we don't want to talk your language.